Hey there, hope all is well. Back at you today with some more RTD news updates. And as always, if you find today's articles to be informative, please share them with our family and friends to help them become more monetarily aware on events happening around them, especially dealing with their own finances. And also, if you're new to RTD, click the subscribe button below for more RTD interviews and updates. Let's get into these articles. Well, today I selected a few articles that I've went through that pretty much deal with events happening all around the globe. So the first one here is being new Zimbabwe note stirs memory of 500 billion% inflation. Next one, it looks like Venezuela is ready to become Cuba. Global banks test Ripple's digital currency in new blockchain trial. Next one, Dear Janet, China devalues most since August. Yuan tumbles to lowest since September 2010. And the last one, Credit Suisse to pay 109.5 million euros in an Italy tax probe. So let's dive into today's articles. Well, this first article here from Bloomberg caught my eye when I saw all these digits here. And for a minute, I stopped thinking, okay, is it trillion, billion, million? I mean, but we have thousands, millions, and billions, and it just blew my mind. And so New Zimbabwe notes stir memory of 500 billion% inflation. That's just unbelievable. Then I looked at this note here, and I actually purchased a couple of these as souvenirs. But here's $100 trillion note. So in Zimbabwe, they had trillionaires, not the typical form that you would think of here as a Westerner. And then it says, I promise to pay the bearer on demand. Pay them what? A single piece of paper of $1 trillion for the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe in 2008. So this is a primary example of fiat money gone wild. So just to give you an idea of what's going on here, it says Zimbabwe's tentative return to its own currency is getting a hostile reception from citizens who fear a recurrence of the 500 billion% inflation that plagued the South African nation before it abandoned its dollar 7 years ago. The country will soon introduce so-called bond notes, pegged to parity with the U.S. dollar and beginning with the denominations worth $2 to $5. Central Bank Governor John Mangade said on Wednesday, it's an attempt to complement the range of foreign currencies used in the beleaguered economy since 2009, which has been in short supply following a collapse in exports. Says James Akupayanya, who sells items such as maize meal, tin food, and blankets from his shop in Muntar, southeast of Harar, isn't buying it. Sunkamwanye, if I'm saying that correctly, and Zimbabweans like him see the notes as a step to the hated Zimbabwe dollar, which by the time of its demise was valued at 150 trillion to one greenback, according to the central bank. So 150 trillion to one greenback. Wow. We were rejected, Sakapawanya said. They can legislate as much as they want, but it is their currency which they want to impose on us to manage the crisis they created. And so here's a different mindset that we have here out west. This is a citizen who's actually been impacted with lack of confidence in the continuous printing of paper. And he said they can legislate as much as they want, but it's their currency, meaning the central bank and the government working together. It's their currency, which they want to impose on us to manage the crisis that they created. And so it kind of, reminds me of what's going on here and the fact that the Federal Reserve is printing their currency and our government's borrowing it, and it's been imposed upon us. And as of right now, majority of people are not aware that it's not worth much. And it's the same system, the same process as in Zimbabwe. But being that we're continually, as of now, currently hold the reserve currency status, it's able to fly under the radar. But yet, one day, like every other central banking system, the truth will come out. And I think most citizens here will have the same approach towards the Federal Reserve note, hence the rethinking the dollar concept. So just a little bit more before we move on. Liquidity crisis. An earlier announcement of plans to introduce the currency sparked riots in Harare, even after the government said the notes, which will be legal tender only in Zimbabwe, will be backed by a $200 million loan from a multilateral lender. Banks have limited the cash withdrawal to prevent hoarding of dollars used in 95% of all transactions in the country, while some shops reported they're running short of essential goods. So here you have another crisis happening. They're going to print more of their own notes. People have no confidence. So-called is legal tender, meaning that they are, kind of are, required to accept them, and they're supposed to be backed by a $200 million loan of dollars. And so you have things that are considered valuable, which to them right now, Federal Reserve notes, they're going into hiding. They're hoarding them, and they're going to exchange those other new fiat notes, to get rid of those things as quick as they can. So as you see, it says they're running out of goods because people are starting to buy things again. So this is a whole nother fiasco that's underway right now, in the midst of having just, not too long ago come out of one. So interesting article here if you're interested below. Get more information on this. This is definitely something worth reading about. So article below. Here's an interesting article here from Forbes, and it's dealing with Venezuela, another country that's plagued by a monetary crisis stemming from, a socialistic type of government and a central bank that believes in the printing press heavily. And so here's the article basically talks about, Venezuela. As it says, it looks like Venezuela is ready to become Cuba. So basically, defaulting possibly on their junk bonds, as it says here, and just basically just saying, hey, this the heck with you. We're going to just go at this, blind-eyed and see what happens. And so just an idea, we have Maduro here giving a speech. It says, it looks like the worst case scenario is unfolding as Venezuela's super duper junk bond, PDVSA, Nicolas Maduro, the leader of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, is moving in the direction of closing Venezuela's economy and moving to Havana. PDVSA is closer to default now. The worst case is moving to the base case. So basically defaulting on their loans and just basically closing their economy from foreign investors and loans and things like that, and just, keeping it all in-house. The market is in denial and thinks Maduro is bluffing or its government would fail quickly afterwards, says Emerging Markets Bond Fund Manager Eric Fine of Vanek Global in New York. Fine said Thursday that default is more likely than not. The PDVSA default is akin to a Venezuelan sovereign default. If there's a country in the Americas that's nothing but one big gas station, it's this. PDVSA is all Venezuela's got, and it ain't got much. Reserves are running dry as Venezuela's central bank now under 12 billion. So within their own savings account in that country, the bank has 12 billion, which is not enough to do much. PDVSA has some 4.2 billion in debt, and interest payments due before the end of the year. The government has 928 million. So the bank has 12 billion in reserves. The government has 928 million in its account. It could burn through the reserves to pay that, and I think it might. This is the best case scenario at this point. So basically what it's saying is the default is coming here, which will cause, a ripple effect because, someone's expecting to be paid on the other end, and to then pay somebody on their end as well. And if it's cut off, then I mean someone's going to lose out, and it's going to be unfortunate. So article here if you're interested. Here's an article here out of CoinDesk, and it's in regards to digital currency. And so as reported before, it looks like central banks are looking to get into the digital currency industry even further in copying and utilizing the blockchain technology. And so here it says global banks test Ripple's digital currency in new blockchain trial. And so basically give you an idea what's going on here. You have 12 members, or 12 banks rather, that's kind of, testing out a new protocol, R3CEV, and so far it's looking promising. And so the article basically goes through just explaining how it works out, and it's something called playing the Nostro margins, which is a process. It talks about regulations and things like that. And so it's quite interesting, but just give an idea what's going on here. It says it's no secret that cryptocurrencies have undergone a dramatic rebrand. No longer perceived as a detriment to the banks and governments, cryptocurrencies are now being hailed as digital assets. As more and more financial institutions become comfortable with the blockchain technology on which they are based, they are openly discussing a future when the future financial tools are just another part of the industry. Now, a dozen banks have announced the completion of an initial trial during which they tested a potential application of a digital asset. Revealed today, 12 member banks of blockchain consortium R3CEV have completed a series of trials using distributed ledger startups Ripple's native XRP. The trials conducted in an environment is set up at R3 Labs were designed to show how banks could save money and create new revenue streams by using XRP to provide liquidity to their many bank accounts around the world. So basically, it just goes through, as I mentioned, how the process is. So basically, just they found a way to basically monetize it in a way where it saves them money and then allows them to make money on the other end. So it's good to say that the process will be implemented pretty soon, and of course, it will be approved because it's something to keep the banking system in control, and then it will force they'll force consumers and depositors onto the same technology, which just minimizes liberty and things like that. So interesting article. If you're interested, it's below. Here we go. Here we have an article from Zero Hedge, and it says, "Dear Janet," of course, Janet Yellen, "China devalues most since August. Yuan tumbles to the lowest since September 2010." So it's an article basically just mentioning how the peg to the dollar is in jeopardy. It says, for the 10th day of the last 11, onshore yuan has weakened against the dollar. A 0.35% devaluation of the yuan fixed, the most since August. Catching down to offshore yuan's weakness suggests Public Bank of China policy is allowing the drop and perhaps sending yet another turmoil-inducing message to the Fed as their hawkishness grows. And so basically here it shows since beginning or the beginning of the month, the golden week, the drop in the yuan against the dollar. And so it's dropping pretty fast, which is in favor of them and not in favor of us. It says plunging yuan back near pre-peg break levels from September 2010. So since 2010, the peg was set down as here at this 680 mark or 685, give or take. So they're attempting to get it back to that same level there, which is not going to work out well for us because that makes the dollar stronger. Sending a message. Here's the S&P climbing and the yuan is dropping. So this is just another issue in the whole currency war that's going on where everybody's trying to race themselves to the bottom to get the advantage on exports and things like that. So interesting how this would turn out because I'm sure pretty soon they're going to come out with some type of retaliation against the Chinese for, doing this. So we'll see. Interesting article if you're interested in checking it out. Right below. So here's the last article here, and it's from Bloomberg. And of course, it's more in the line of just fines and things like that. It seems like a lot of banks globally now are either being fined or paying a fine and, just admitting to the fact they did something wrong, but yet no one actually paying the price as far as quote unquote jail time or facing time for the crime. So here we have Credit Suisse to pay 109.5 million in Italy. Credit Suisse Group AG agreed to pay 109.5 million euros to the Italian authorities investigating the bank's past use of insurance policies allegedly to help clients evade taxes. So the fact that policies were put in place to help people evade taxes allegedly is what they're paying for. So it's good to say if they're paying, then they're agreeing. And so therefore there's no CEO that'll be mentioned nowhere on top as a person that will be held accountable in the court for this, but they'll just pay a fine and move on like always. Swiss Bank will pay 8.5 million euros for administrative infringements and 101 million euros in taxes. Late payment interest and penalties to end the probe. Credit Suisse said in a statement on Friday, the agreement removes another legal hurdle for Credit Suisse, which paid a fine of 2.6 billion in 2014 for helping Americans evade taxes. It remains under investigation in the U.S. over its mortgage-backed securities business with the financial crisis and also faces claims from former clients who say they lost money on unauthorized bets by their advisor. So here's another bank here that was involved in the mortgage-backed securities crisis. So we'll see if the Department of Justice, pretty soon slap a big fine on them. But it's good to say as long as Credit Suisse continue to play the the American game, there'll be no fines mentioned. But if they were involved in a mortgage-backed security, which I'm assuming they were, there should be a hefty fine taxed to them as well. But we'll see how that pans out. So interesting article if you're interested below. And as always, if you find these articles informative, feel free to share them. And also leave me a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these articles. And other than that, I'll see you later. Have a good weekend.